Thank you for continuing with BSB41507. I'm Trudy Robinson. This presentation is covering some of the requirements of time management techniques, in particular the process of sequencing tasks. We will be covering durations, summary tasks, milestones, constraints and deadlines. A separate presentation will go through the relationships of tasks. The PMBOK 4 references Chapter 6 starting on page 129. Each task included in the project timeline must be given a duration. There must be a definition for each type of duration, including days, hours, minutes, months, and of course weeks. The use of D for days, H for hours, M for minutes, MO for months, and W for weeks is common. However, depending on the software you're using for the creation of your timeline, this may vary. A summary task in any project management software package relates to the heading or a grouping of subtasks. The formatting of this heading task or summary task is often bold, or it's formatted to show that it is higher in the hierarchy in the task sheet or the work breakdown structure. This is something that you may choose to do manually, or it might be automated once a task has subtasks. A summary task may be displayed as a bar on a Gantt chart to show the beginning date to the end date of all its subtasks. A milestone in a timeline indicates when a phase or stage is complete. It may be entered as a task with a duration length of 0. And it will often display in a software package as a unique icon on the Gantt. For example, MS Project uses a white or a black diamond. After you've created an initial work breakdown structure, it's often useful to go and include milestones where you want a checkpoint or a benchmark in place so that you can go through a checklist where specific things need to occur. For example, if you're doing a renovation or a building, you might include milestones when specific inspections need to occur. And after a series of those inspections, you might have a milestone included that says all inspections complete. A milestone may necessitate extra tasks to be added into the timeline or work breakdown structure. Another concept relates to constraints. A constraint, obviously from the term, is introducing a restriction on a particular task. The default constraint is usually as soon as possible, so if you have two tasks, then the second task will commence as soon as it possibly can. However, there are other constraints. A task can be set to finish as late as possible, or as soon as possible, or finish no earlier than a certain date, no later than a certain date, or you can force them to start on a particular date or finish on a particular date. A further constraint is that you can start a task no earlier than a particular timeline. Now, depending on the project that you're working on, these constraints can be introduced on all or any specific task. There is a great deal of information relating to constraints and their types and impacts on a timeline available publicly on the internet. Different links will be provided from the timeline subjects page. And of course, the last constraint is starting no later than. So stop and think about the tasks that you're introducing into your project and how these work. Don't introduce them just because they're there. Put a constraint in place when it means something to the task or through the different stages or process throughout your project. Deadlines are another concept that will need to be introduced. It is a type of constraint or similar to a constraint. However, it's not dependent on predecessor and successor tasks. Predecessor and successor tasks will be covered in a further presentation. A deadline is obviously when a task needs to be completed by. If that task fails to finish within the deadline, an indicator can appear in the project Gantt chart or timeline. However, the start and finish times remain unaffected. As I mentioned earlier, task relationships will be covered in a separate presentation. In summary, it is your responsibility as a project manager to understand the different impacts on the task and how they apply to your project. Take the time at the beginning of your project to create a full and transparent timeline. It will pay you back 1,000-fold. But of course, the assessment criteria relating to timeline management is detailed in the assessment task sheet.